Hello, healthy people, and welcome back to the Organelle podcast. Today's episode is an introduction to health excellence through exercise. We're going to navigate through the direct relationship between health and exercise, what most people get wrong when it comes to exercising, and how you can revolutionize your quality of life in as little as 2 short sessions a week. As always, I'm Xavier Greenhalgh, and joining me is none other than Organelle, the digital health platform's founding practitioner, Lionel Godwin. So, without further ado, let's all take the next step on our health journeys. Good morning, Lionel. How are we?
Xavier, I am very happy to be back for our, I think, what is this, our 7th podcast, I think?
That's it, lucky number 7.
Lucky number 7.
We're going to be moving ahead with our Organelle Basics series here, and today's topic of discussion is exercise. If you've missed it, dear listener, the last 2 episodes we've covered the basics of nutrition and the basics of pathology, and now we're moving forward to the third key pillar of Organelle, and that is exercise, the type of activity that you put your body through, or at least that's how I like to think about it. Lionel, why don't you do us the pleasure of opening us up with a nice, simple definition of exactly what is exercise?
So, and it is a simple definition, to be honest. Effectively, exercise is any form of activity that involves using your muscles and your heart and just the whole musculoskeletal system with the view to improving your overall health and well-being. It's a really simple thing. It's just about having a routine that, one, is age appropriate, 2, is consistent with your level of health and wellness, and 3, meets your physical requirements around movement.
Right. Can we build on that a little bit, maybe? What are we talking about when we say physical requirements of movement? What are the kind of things that go factor into determining those
So
requirements?
you may not have heard it. You're a very young man, but there's an old saying that's been around for years: move it or lose it. So understand the human body. The human body I regard as what I refer to as just a marvel of nature's engineering. The human body itself is so well designed, and at its core, it's designed for movement. So if you understand that we have our spine, and I always see the spine as our center of wellness, around that spine, we have the muscles that support the spine. So the better we support that spine, the better the muscles around the spine work. The better the muscles around the spine works, the more upright we are. The more upright we are, the better our rib cage is opened. Then the better our organs and everything sit within our skeletal system, and the better everything functions. So any form of movement or activity that encourages you to have good posture, allows your muscles to be working, and allows them to work in synergy with your skeleton is an absolute positive for me. Yeah, yes and no. I mean,
Mm.
it's about making sure that the spine itself is as upright, and as the
Mm.
vertebra within the spine are separated enough so that there's no impingements and no nerve damage, and supporting. The best way to support the spine is to have the muscles that are attached to the spine doing what they're designed to do, which then allows the spine to do what it is designed to do as well, which is to encase all of our organs and stuff. But the other benefits, the enormous benefits of exercise extend just beyond the spine. We're talking about it improves our mind, it improves our heart. Obviously, that's one of the significant factors in it. It helps prevent cancers. It helps promote better sleep. It improves our body's immune system. So it reduces stress. So there's so many advantages to exercise and movement. However, exercise and movement shouldn't be defined by what you read or what you see. It should be defined by what you are able to do consistently and what is capable between your own ranges of movement. So for me, exercise should always have a what I will call an aerobic or cardiac opponent to it, but there also should be some weight bearing to it as well. So, and weight bearing can come through doing weights in a gym or using bands or just doing body weight exercises. Cardiovascular training can be done through brisk walking, through getting on a rowing machine, going for a swim, going for a ride on a bike, going for a run. There's so many different forms of movement and exercise that we can engage in, but it just needs to be for you as an individual, the type of movement that allows you, one, to be really consistent with it, and two, that fits in within the timeframes and the physical capacity you have for movement. Now, my attitude to training has always been the more I move it, the more inclined I am to want to move it, and the better it will move. So, whilst yes, the spine is important, and that the transmissions between the brain and the spine are really, really important. It's just overall movement in support of the spine, but also our organs and our immune systems and our mind that is most relevant to me when it comes to exercise and movement.
Yeah, I get you. So we touched on a few important distinctions there that I want to kind of bring back up. I think the primary question, at least for me, is that based on my very rudimentary knowledge, you can kind of decompose exercise into two main camps. Obviously, there's more sub things, but there's two big ones, and that's your kind of resistance training and your aerobic training. Could you take us through that distinction, if it's a real distinction, and how each of those specifically is going to impact someone's health?
Okay, so if we look at an individual and if we want to look at an ideal regime, I would like to see most people that I work with, what I try and encourage, depending on their own goals and aspirations, of course. If it's people that are just looking to maintain a healthy lifestyle with adequate movement and adequate resistance training, I like to get people to do around 150 hours, sorry, 150 hours, 150 minutes a week of cardiovascular or aerobic training, and 75 minutes, so half that amount in weight-bearing resistance type training. So, you're talking about 225 minutes a week of both cardiovascular training and resistance or weight-bearing training.
Yeah, and even if that sounds like a lot, that's only 4 hours, right? So
It's
it'd work out
such a
something
short
like
amount of
45
time.
minutes a day.
Yeah, it's such a short
Right.
amount of time.
So we'd have about
So,
twice as much aerobic slash cardiovascular training as we would a resistance slash weight training.
yep.
How does each of those, independent of each other, really affect our physiological systems and our overall health? Like, what does resistance
Okay,
training do for our bodies, and what does cardiovascular training do for our
so
bodies?
cardiovascular training primarily works with the heart and gets the heart pumping really efficiently and effectively. With that, we're improving our digestive system because blood flow is improved, and increased oxygenation of the blood means that it's flowing more freely. The blood is not sticky and being congealed. It's moving really frequently along the thousands and thousands of miles of blood vessels within our system. It's improving the way our joints work. It's enabling the deposit, because of the efficiency of the blood flow around the body, the depositing of far more good nutrients around our body systems. The weight training itself is really working on the muscles and the way the muscles work synergistically within the spine, the way the muscles support each other. The bicep and the tricep support each other. The shoulders play an important role. Chest and back work synergistically together. Hamstrings, quads, glutes, they all work together. So, we're one, giving them and allowing them to work really, really well when we're doing weight training. We're also allowing them to work synergistically so that the muscles, because we're training them, are working together really, really, really well. And they're providing the skeletal system with all the support that it needs by the muscles doing what they're designed to do, which is to support that the skeletal system. So, weight training allows us to have increased strength, which is really, really important in just our day-to-day lives. And our cardiovascular system allows us to have such good blood flow around our body, and is at all times strengthening the heart and improving our vitality in our everyday. For me personally, I know if I don't do my cardio, and I like to do cardio, I do around 25 to 30 minutes of cardio a day. In a specific cardio, I walk everywhere. So I walk probably an hour a day just as part of my natural day. But then I have 30 to 35 minutes of specific aerobic training or cardiovascular training every day. And I can tell the differences in myself. If I go 2 or 3 days without my cardiovascular training, I notice it immediately. I notice my concentration isn't as good. I feel lethargic straight away. I get so energized by doing my cardiovascular training that it has an immediate impact on me if I miss more than 2 or 3 days. Now, I never normally, as a rule, miss 2 or 3 days, but sometimes with travel or whatever, travel's the only reason, I'll just point this out, Xaviour, travel's the only reason that I will ever miss a training session. I'll never miss a training session because I'm too busy at work or anything else. It's only travel that will ever stop me missing a training session. That's how important it is to me. But, it helps regulate for me every aspect of my overall mindset, the way that I feel, the energy that I have, the motivation that I have, and the effort that I can put into other things as a consequence of doing my cardio every single day that I get the chance to.
Okay, bit of a left field one here for you. What's something that most people get wrong about the relationship between exercise and health?
Really good question. Mostly people get their ambitions mixed up with their capabilities, first and foremost. Secondly, they set unrealistic goals for what outcomes they're looking from their training. So because of that unrealistic expectation, generally, as a rule, people will start a program, and if they don't get the results within a time frame that they thought was appropriate, then they'll give it up, or they'll badmouth it, or they'll go on to something else. I think if we're going to have a regime around exercise, then we need to be very clear in our minds about what that looks like, what are realistic expectations around the benefits from this in terms of what we physically see. Obviously, we can test with our biomarker testing that we do at Organelle to see from a blood works perspective what impact it's having. But too many people want to measure it by what they are seeing on the scale, or how they think they should be looking, rather than how they actually are looking and what's actually going on beyond just the scales. So it's, the biggest, to answer the question, it's what your expectations are probably the greatest thing that people struggle with.
And would you say there that people are expecting like too many aesthetic changes as opposed to functional changes? Or I think the key issue we're boiling down to here is that there are certain things that are easy to measure, which aren't really that important, like the raw number on the scale, or the number of plates you can bench press, or how visible your abs are. But there are other things like the quality of the blood that flows through your veins, the speed and ease at which it does so, which are a lot harder to measure, so we associate a lot less importance to them. What can someone do to start shifting their metrics? How can you start tracking that kind of really important health function?
So blood works, clearly biomarkers is the number one for me. The number two that I use, and I use this for as many people as I can, is I like to get a body composition analysis done on people, because that's the easiest tool for me to show people what's happening across the body, as opposed to just a number on a scale. If I had my way, scales would be thrown out of every household in Australia. They're not an accurate measurement of how we're going. So to answer your question more succinctly, biomarkers is number one for me. Body composition analysis is number two. clearly the way we feel, the small things that we can monitor. For instance, if you're doing a cardio session, the fact that let's use a rower, for instance. If you're doing a rowing session for 10 minutes, you might notice that after 2 or 3 weeks, you've actually traveled 150 meters further in your whatever time frame you've set aside for your rowing, as a measurement, as a way of measuring how well you've done. You might have started off originally with your 10 minutes on the row, you might have done 2,000 meters. Now you've noticed 2 weeks later, you're getting up to 2,200 meters. So there's these little increments that you're seeing that are happening there. There's the way that your clothes fit you. That's obvious, and another way for people to see it. There's the feedback you get from people. People look at you and go, geez, you're looking healthy, you're looking better, your skin seems to have better coloring, or little things like that, again, are positive affirmations. But, if I'm going to look at it from a purely scientific perspective, I would always go to my biomarkers, and I would always go to my body composition analysis to ascertain exactly how well we're going.
You said a lot of things there that I want to touch point on, but I'll try and order them relatively in way. First of all, we need to explain this distinction of not trusting the scale. And to my basic understanding, that's because you can't really tell with objective weight measurement, because what's really more important is how much you're reducing fat and increasing muscle mass. So you might see a number go up on the scale, but in reality, you've reduced 200 grams of fat, but you put on 400 grams of muscle mass, which means that your scale's going to show that you've actually gained weight. And you're going to maybe perceive that as a bad thing, but it's actually a great thing. Just to clarify for the listeners at home, is that right?
Yeah, that's 100% right. So scales, as far as I'm concerned, destined you to fail. That's the easiest way I can put it, because we measure ourselves by a number on a scale. Now, that number can be made up when you look at the human body. So we might use me as an example. I don't want to always use myself as an example, but I'm made up of 43 kilos of muscle, 52 liters of water, and about 8 grams, 10 to 12 grams, 10 to 12 kilograms of protein. Now, that makes up my total body weight. Now, within that, I've also got 10 kilograms of fat on my body. Now, if I'm doing an exercise program and I'm lifting weights, my fat generally is going to be reduced, because if I'm serious about it, I'm eating really, really well, I'm training consistently. So even at 63, I know that I'm creating conditions to still build muscle if I want to. So part of my regime is I want to measure how that muscle's going, whether I'm putting on lean muscle, whether I'm dropping body fat, whether my protein levels and my water consumption is up and as high as I want it to be. So these are all measurements that I'm never going to get from a set of scales. I'll get a number from a set of scales, but they're not going to highlight my water. They're not going to highlight my lean muscle mass. They're not going to certainly tell me about my body fat percentage. They're not going to tell me about my visceral fat percentage. They're not going to tell me about the amount of protein in my body, or how much all this stuff weighs as well. So if I'm breaking down my body, I'm looking at the numbers. I'm looking at how much water I've got, because that's a weight measurement. I'm looking at the amount of muscle I've got. That's a weight measurement. I'm looking at my protein in my body. That's a weight measurement. I'm looking at my visceral fat. That's another weight measurement. So I'm looking at all of the different spheres of measurement, not just a single number. I'm looking at how that single number on the scales is made up. I want to know what that 90, in my case, 90 kilos on a scale is made up of, right? I might not, someone might say, oh, you're only, 183 centimeters, you're 90 kilos. Are you carrying weight or something? I said, no, because this is what my body is made up of. I'm looking at what is making up that number on the scale.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to keep in mind when we're trying to track this specific part of our health journeys. Okay, got another interesting one for you. I'm going to give you a fake situation here, and I want you to dispense some leading practitioner wisdom for me. So let's suppose that we have a guy, let's call him Bob. Bob is a stressed out businessman. He works 80 hours a week. He has very little time left over from that work. That little time he does, he kind of spends with his family. He's getting overweight, his muscle function's shutting down. He knows that he needs to start exercising, but he just does not have the time to commit 4 whole hours a week. So he's put aside 2 sessions a week, maybe 30 minutes each. That's all he's got for exercise, but he's willing to give it a go. If you could only fill that 1 hour a week, the two 30-minute sessions, which I think anyone can scrounge up, what would you put in those?
That's a really good question. First, I'd be encouraging Bob to do far more than the 30-minute sessions a week, because I don't personally think it's enough. But if that's all he's got, I would be making that up of 15 minutes of resistance training and 15 minutes of cardiovascular, getting both. And even though in my earlier reference, I said I'd do twice as much cardio as I would weight training or resistance training in an ideal world, someone like Bob, who needs to rethink his priorities to some extent and needs to think about how he can get some exercise or movement into his day-to-day, even though he's working 80 hours a week, it may mean that he spends a lot more time standing up rather than sitting at his desk. But there's a whole range of things that I would work on Bob behind the scenes to try and get some more movement and activity happening. But if he had only those 2 sessions, both those sessions would consist of 15 minutes of cardio, 15 minutes of weight training. The other thing that I would be encouraging with Bob would be to have those days separated. So I wouldn't be doing Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, so 2 consecutive days. I'd be breaking them up so that there was a gap in between. But along that journey with Bob, I would certainly be looking at ways and means of seeing how we could surreptitiously or slyly put more movement in there. Every time Bob left the office, I'd be getting him to walk down the stairs rather than the elevator or the escalator. I'd be getting him to park his car further away from his office or whatever. I'd be looking at little ways and means where we could surreptitiously increase that amount of movement, because to be perfectly honest, for most people, 30 minutes twice a week is nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough for what the body actually requires.
It's a nice first step, though. It's a move in the right direction. Just to make it really, because I'm obviously intending this for the person at home who's listening to us and really wants to start doing exercise, but they just don't have the motivation, they don't have the time. They're like, yeah, I think I could find 2 30-minute sessions. So specifically, what would we be thinking in terms of resistance? What would we be thinking in terms of cardio? Are we thinking just basic compound lifts followed by treadmill?
No, I wouldn't be doing anything.
No.
I wouldn't be doing anything like that. If Bob only had 2 30-hour sessions a week, what that would look like would be 30 minutes walking per week. But in that walking session, every 3 minutes and 5 times. So every 3 minutes he's going to stop and he's going to do a minute of push-ups. The next 3-minute window he's going to do 45 lunges or a minute of lunges. The next 5 minutes he's going to do some bench dips on a bench somewhere, or some push-ups on an angle. The next 30 minutes he's going to do some sit-ups, and if possible he's going to do the next 3 minutes he's going to do as many chin-ups in a minute that he could do. So that's how I would be breaking it up. He's actually going for a 30-minute walk, but every 3 minutes in that 30-minute walk, he's doing some form of resistance training. As I said, push-ups, lunges, chin-ups if there's a place to do chin-ups, angle push-ups, changing his hand positions, star jumps, burpees, things like that just add the cardiovascular component, but also the resistance element to it. I'd also probably be encouraging Bob to tie some resistance band around his waist and using the resistance band to do some curls and other things that, he's tied them around his waist. They're not impediment. They're not heavy to carry. They're just around his waist. He just undoes them. And that would be my ideal workout for someone like Bob. Having said that, though, prior to Bob doing that, I'd be ensuring that particularly Bob is doing what you suggested, which is working 80 hours a week and virtually having no time. I'd be getting a really good health assessment prior to starting any form of exercise, just to make sure that it's within his capacity at this particular time. I would never encourage anybody to start a rigorous training regime or even a semi-rigorous training regime if they haven't been doing it for quite some time or they've led a very sedentary lifestyle. I would certainly encourage them to have a health checkup or visiting us at Organelle and speaking to one of our practitioners to get the best advice on how to transition into whatever form of exercise regime he is about to take on.
There you go. If you're in a situation similar to our dear Bob here, and you just can't find the time, but you want to start by getting a checkup with some kind of practitioner, preferably an organelle one, and then follow that up with this really simple kind of circuit workout that, honestly, so small and so effective that you could fit it in on a lunch break. Okay, yeah. Lionel, we've looked at the minimum case, right? Now, because we're quick on time, I really want to hear your thoughts on this before we close out the episode. Let's look at the maximal case. Let's say someone's got all the time in the world to exercise. They're really committed to being like the most athletic human being they can be. What's the ideal workout regime look like?
Whatever the ideal workout is, whatever is going to help them achieve their goals and aspirations around themselves. The key component to whatever program they look at, and I'll come back to the program in a minute, is to also ensure, though, one, that they're getting great nutrition, two, that they're allowing adequate rest as well. You know, the human body itself requires rest for restoration. So, you know, if we're going to talk about an ideal regime, for me, an ideal regime would be resistance training 5 days a week. And that resistance training could take the form of a full body workout every single day or working on specific body parts every single day, followed by a committed cardiovascular regime as well. And the cardiovascular regime for me, depending on the individual, would be swimming, running, cycling, rowing machines, elliptical machines, treadmills, or ski ergs, whatever form of cardio really floats your boat, but a resistance training program that allowed you to achieve the goals and aspirations you've got around building a bigger chest, building beach arms, having bigger thighs, or having just a full body, a good, lean, full body muscle program that allows you to achieve what you're looking to achieve with your training. There is, an ideal training program for me would look different to someone who's a triathlete, for instance. So to finish up, an ideal program would be one that meets your individual needs consistent with your goals and aspirations. Sorry for going on about that.
It's all good. We love to hear it. Okay, that's been a phenomenal episode. We can put the nice little ribbon on that one. I'm sure we'll have more to say in this in the future, but that's a nice primer.
Yeah.
To everyone listening,
I hope we do, Xaviour, over time. I hope we get to talk much more about movement, exercise, conditioning, all of these things. It's a really important topic, and it's one that we could talk about for hours and hours and hours. And I hope moving forward as part of the podcast that people who are following us start to fire in questions that they want answered around their own specific individual needs. We can talk about generic cases with individuals who ask us a question, or we can be more, just general in the advice that we're giving.
Absolutely. That sounds great to me. Now I'm looking forward to the day when we have the opportunity to do that kind of thing. So, for everyone listening, if you found anything we've said interested or want to find out more about us or the company we work for, Organelle, you can go to organelle.com.au. That's organelle.com.au. Okay, thank you for your time today, Lionel, and I'll see you in the next one.
You will. Thanks, Xaviour. Take care.